We'll never be moved from here. Our lives can live in the seeds we've sown.
Welcome to The Art of Relating, a space where relationship, intimacy, and sacred sexuality become pathways to liberation. Here, every rupture is a teacher, every desire is an opening, and every difference is an opportunity to deeper intimacy. Whether we are unraveling attachment wounds, leaning into conflict with presence, or returning to love as a living practice, this is where we explore what becomes possible in relationship when we choose to stay. I'm your host, Tammy Chow from Somatic Spirit. Hi, Rahi and Ariel. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I'm so excited to have this conversation. I've been on my own sacred sexuality journey and coming into creating that divine union within myself and manifesting my partner that I feel like could really meet me emotionally, sexually, and spiritually, and be somebody that I could navigate conscious love with. And I've been really calling in the right teachers to learn from. And I've been working in my teacher, Adriana Rizzolo, in the women's tantra space and done so much sexuality healing with myself and with other women. And so for the past 5 years have been in this place of really sitting back and using my critical thinking and reasoning to really see all the different teachers out there in this sphere of sacred sexuality and masculine, feminine polarity. And it's just been interesting that it takes a lot of discernment in my experience to find what's right for me. And for me, I really, coming from somatic experiencing and trauma healing modalities, I really prioritize safety and how much slowness and safety it's required for me to unfreeze from, my sexual trauma and my upbringing to even feel safe in sexuality rather than blipping forward and bypassing all of these boundaries within myself, for example, in some other neo-tantra spaces, which I would love to get into all of that with you today. So all that to say, I feel like I've been long waiting for the right teachers and that I'm really blessed to be in your presence today and to begin learning with you. So I'd love to hear about each of your personal journeys and how you found each other before creating Divine Union for Lovers.
Oh, that's a great invitation, a great jumping off point.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Well, Tammy, to be honest with you, I feel like my journey into touch and tantra and energy and intimacy started when I came out of the womb. I came out of my mom's womb with very crooked legs. The doctors wanted to perform surgery on my infant knees. My mom, being a nurse, said no way. It could have just been her mama protection energy too. And instead, she lotioned and massaged my legs every night for 3 years until they grew out straight, which they eventually did. But I was always touch is what healed me. So touch is my first love language. And then cut to in college, I spent a year living in Japan, and I did a lot of traveling throughout Asia, and I found a Buddhist monastery in the north of Thailand and did an intensive 21-day Vipassana retreat. So it was this combination of touch and presence. And I came to soon learn that really had a spontaneous healing effect when there were parts of tissues or bodies that were not used to being touched with that kind of presence. We were in a conversation yesterday and someone said, how, like every moment can have an infinite depth. So, time goes linear, but there's a depth to an experience. And when touch is present and intentional, it can have that quality of depth. And that is oftentimes the medicine that the body needs. And so, in essence, I went down a rabbit hole of Tantra, Taoist practices. Master Chia was very influenced in my life. Margot Anand was as well. And then Ariel's been my other teacher of significance, and that's been more recently. So I'll let you introduce yourself, and then we can share how our paths crossed.
Okay. So my journey has been one of really understanding the spectrum of sexuality and what can happen in sexuality through kind of like first delving through all the darker, grittier, muddier realms when it's distorted, and then finding my way back from that into like the beauty and the pleasure. So I experienced sexual abuse as a child. And then, as a way to really want to explore my sexuality and reclaim my sexuality, I got into sex work. And there, I first stripper, and there were ways in which I was able to do that and feel empowered and find more agency and also like play and have fun. But also, I had no capacity at that point to feel into my own boundaries, to advocate for myself. So it was a pretty dangerous environment for me. And a lot happened in my body that I didn't want. So I experienced further trauma. And after that was sexually trafficked. Then I became a real estate agent for about a decade. And during that time, went deeply into my healing journey. And I worked with both like the energetics of my body through plant medicine, and then through pleasure when I found somatic sex education. So I really started in my healing journey. There were so many different things I did in my healing journey, but the two most influential paths that I walked were with the plants and with pleasure. And over time, really coming back home into my body, into my sexuality, and through my experiences, really understanding the distortion of it in our culture so that I could like unwinding that from my own system and then seeing really clearly how it plays out in other people's nervous systems, but just in our culture at large.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much.
And then that kind of like, that's where our paths intersected. About 5 years ago, we were both certified somatic sex educators, knew of each other, and then you kind of tracked me down. And then, and we connected, and then Ariel ended up taking my 3 keys to genital de-armoring course, came for the live training, which is where we met for the first time in person. At the same time, I was exploring, I'm really fascinated by the plant and psychedelic world, and specifically how it can support somatic long-term healing. You know, particularly, we know it creates new neural pathways, new somatic pathways in the body. And I wanted to explore that with our field of somatic sex education. So I was seeking Ariel's advice and expertise in different aspects of the plant world that I was just learning. And then we came together in Canada. We're part of this collective called the Eros Lab, and it explores that intersection of the plant world and erotic healing. And so we got together. She asked if we could do a group cuddle the first night. Later on, I found out it was just because she wanted to cuddle with me. And then the next day, we had an exercise, and then it was just so obvious. And there was just this kind of energetic resonance between us that was undeniable. I mean, it's like I'd put my hand on her hip, and she would be like, "Oh, my hip wanted your hand there." Like this kind of like unspoken language between two bodies. And so that was kind of the start of it. And that was about 2 years ago now.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And yeah, there's so many different segues. I'm curious about the plant medicine part of it and how you found that to be in ceremony with sexuality. Like, how do you work with plant medicine and sexuality together?
Well, I work with it and we work with it in different ways depending on the context. So, you know, like the way that I've worked with myself in plant medicine ceremony is like, I remember the last master plant dieta I was in. At the end of one of the ceremonies, we're working with ayahuasca. The medicine had kind of faded out, but I was laying there and my cervix just wanted to be touched. So, you know, I had my under my blanket and I was just touching my cervix. So it's kind of like giving myself permission to be a sexual person while I'm doing plant medicine. And it doesn't mean that I'm doing anything I want in the space. But I think in the plant medicine world, there's a lot of hard lines around you may not have like the understandable rule of you may not have sex here turns into, for a lot of people, you may not be a sexual being.
Right. Yeah. Similar to church growing up or religion, or it's just this way that sexuality has been divorced from the divine and spirit, right?
But you know what's interesting, Tammy, is over a decade I've been holding sessions. I've had so many clients come to me saying it was an ayahuasca journey or a deep hero's dose of psilocybin that made them realize that confirmed their violation when they were younger, or they realized or they recognized that it was time to address their sexual healing. So the way I see it, the plant world really clears out what's not of our nature, within our psyche, and it illuminates to us what is in the body that is blocking that natural flow of life force. And so it's no surprise on so many plant journeys that the realization of what's the obstacle or what's impeding sexual aliveness would come to light.
I love that.
Yeah. And like in our couples retreats that we do, the last day we bring in grandfather medicine, Wachuma. And, the first 2 days people are going through one-way touch practices. And then the last day bringing in some Wachuma to like bring in that spirit and bring in the support of the medicine to go even deeper with the practices that they've already been doing over the last 2 days.
Right. Beautiful. And yeah, you were going to say something, Rahi?
Well, yeah. I mean, like just the last couples retreat we did, all 3 couples, they were at very different junctures in their partnership. One couple both people had just come out of divorces and were dating. It was their 3rd date, and they signed up for a 3-day intensive with him on the 3rd day. And then the other couple, fast track. And then the other couple was married like 15 or like a long time. And the Wachuma on the 3rd day seemed to support each couple in resolving a core issue that was blocking them from deeper intimacy.
Wow. Oh my gosh. And curious, what are some really big core issues that you find in long-term relationships when people come to you?
Oh my God, we could talk for hours on that, just on that alone. I mean, I'm always surprised, like in our world, like one-way touch is kind of a pillar, because we learn so much from having no responsibility, but just focusing on how we're being touched, or giving practice to our voice and asking and adjusting the kind and quality of touch we want. And these common everyday practices, I'm always surprised when we work with couples because it's very new to a lot of couples.
Right. And so it's like, it's an example of some things that it can unearth for people, common issues and patterns is like, maybe someone has been enduring for years. They don't actually like the way their partner is touching them. So there's a lot of built up resentment, anger, and maybe they've come to even like brace against their touch. Performance is another side of that, a really good pattern.
Yeah. And then I would say also, in a lot of couples, because the arousal patterns for vulva owners and penis owners are so different, for our heterosexual couples, there's almost like a giving up on the female's part that the man will ever last as long as she wants. There's almost like a deflation, kind of a passive acceptance that this is just how things are, because our society doesn't really speak openly about the question you just posed. It's really not talked about. Socially, couples get together, they want to look good, they're making jokes about it, but no one really gets to, the wounding that happens when we're children and how that's carried into our adult intimate patterns and, how to repair ruptures, we don't talk about that in society.
Right. And that's why I love your work so much. And, it's like so much the basis of my work is attachment and nervous system and trauma, because I feel like sometimes there's a misconception that just like sex is its like own thing and we have problems with sex in our relationship and marriage, but maybe it's like surprising for people that it has everything to do with attachment wounds and trauma that may have never had anything to do with sexual trauma. Just even the simple thing you're naming of asking for what you want. It's hard enough as a woman for me to have learned to ask for what I want in terms of chores or for help in my life. Like to even think of asking for what I want sexually, it was something so far removed, especially when many of us have been socialized with porn and, like you said, just conditioned into this performance, which for me in a female body it's all about my appearance and how my body looks and how I'm performing to make a man ejaculate. And I've heard similarly from the other side, from men, of how long they can last, how long they can keep an erection, and going on this path and deepening with each partner and just seeing, wow, the shitloads of neuroses that we carry that keep us actually from the thing we both want, which is deep love and to be seen and true intimacy, right? And you speak about one-way touch as one of the pillars, and I'd love to go deeply into that, but just for listeners to get an idea of your whole body of work of Divine Union for Lovers, can you name all the pillars of your work that create this body of work?
Yeah, we start with the foundational pillar, which itself is called the 8 Pillars of Intimacy. And this is the work that Ariel's been cultivating over years, but it really meets any person or any couple where they're at in terms of understanding the art of attunement, both self-attunement and relational attunement.
And what are the 8 pillars?
So it's slowing down, it's pausing, noticing, accepting, trusting, valuing, attuning, and communicating. So the thing about all of these pillars, right, they're all skills that we're going to continue to practice and deepen into our whole life. So they can really meet anyone wherever they're at. And they're really like a blueprint for self-reclamation, for intimacy with self, for intimacy with another. And all of the pillars before attunement are what actually allow for someone to deepen into attunement, the skills that are necessary to keep refining and deepening into it.
And, one of our students, it struck her that the last pillar is communicating, but every pillar before that is really an inner inquiry and exploration with self. It's really a deepening of self-intimacy.
Yeah. And they can seem so simple on the face, but they can actually be quite confronting because it requires us to be super aware and honest with ourselves about what we're feeling, not pushing anything away. And letting that be seen and known, and it's deeply vulnerable.
Totally. Yeah, it's the opposite of performance. It's instead of the action, which is all we ever see in movies and porn and, what we think we should do, it's the inaction. It's the stillness. It's almost the same as our personal spiritual or meditative practice to get to know ourselves, but then within a lovership, to create the third thing that holds the couple together, right?
Yeah. So, we have a kind of foundational module 1 that goes over the 8 pillars. We talk about consent. We talk about, we share a practice on holding grief and disappointments together. And then we start moving into one-way touch practices and nervous system. How does the nervous system correlate to sexual responsiveness? And then how to work with our nervous system responses. All sorts of different tools to work with, whether someone goes into hypo or hyperarousal. And then we have a lot of instructional videos of the one-way practices that include things like genital mapping and ecstatic erotic massage.
Body awakening.
Yeah.
I feel like the treasure in the one-way practices are several. One, the receiver has no responsibility, but just to inquire, what is it that their body wants, and be present to their sensations. And both people learn so much more about, oh, I never knew the sides of your torso was an erogenous zone, or the inside of your wrist. So that's one area. But then the other thing that it yields is we're really big on non-genital penetrative lovemaking because the culture just focuses on, cis hetero penetration, or focusing on orgasms or multi-orgasms. And there's so much intimacy, so many undiscovered terrains before even getting there. So that when you do get there, if you want to get there, it can be more of a meditation than some goal or climax you're reaching for.
Right. which I feel like when it just becomes that mundane expectation in a long-term relationship, that's what creates that brace and that freeze and that like pushing away of even wanting sex, because that's the only possibility we've ever been taught. And I love, the one-way touch. I notice something that comes up for me and has in the past is the being able to to receive, right? And this like neuroses in me that's like, are they enjoying this? Like I should be giving, like, okay, that's enough. Enough for me. Like it's your turn. And can you say a little bit more about that?
I mean, wow, so common.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's the beauty of the one-way touch practices, is that allows the receiver and the giver the spaciousness. Because when you're going at it two ways, there's so much to keep track of. So the spaciousness to really track whatever patterning you have for you, and this particular patterning of like guilt or feeling like you have to do something to receive, you get to watch it, and then over time, if you keep showing up to receive, you're going to start to build your capacity to receive. You just keep showing
Mm-hmm.
up, just noticing when it comes, name it out loud, hold it for
Right.
yourself, allow your partner to hold it with you too. And over time, it does really change.
And it's also very
Mm-hmm.
valuable. It's in the course, I believe in module 2, of taking an inventory with your partner, with your lover, taking an inventory of, like, just as you mentioned earlier, like our attachment wounds and patterns start when we're very young. And our resistance, guilt, all around receiving, that generally starts when we're very young as well. So to
Mm-hmm.
understand what intimacy patterns, what relational patterns we can recognize within ourselves since we were very young, and share that with our partner so that they don't take things personally when it shows up,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in our adult relationship. But things like receiving and the resistance or the celebration in receiving, stuff like that generally starts very young.
Yeah, definitely. And also with sexual trauma, right? Like it feels less safe to receive. And I'm curious then, how do you move through that kind of charge together slowly to start to feel safe to open to penetration or to receiving touch?
Well, my experience with moving through that in my own body has been pausing when something like
Hmm.
that comes up. That's the biggest thing. And then just holding it and letting it be what it
Right.
is. So never pushing through or forcing, doing my best to accept what is happening, even if I don't like it. And like only choosing partners who are able to pause and slow down with me.
Yeah, like sometimes the medicine really is just pausing, slowing down, and having a compassionate witness in the moments that were otherwise, you were scared and alone and frozen and couldn't say what you needed.
Yeah, and maybe once I pause and slow down, like I might need some time to even kind of like orient to what's happening for me. And then maybe I'll want to be hugged, or maybe I'll
Mm,
want just a gentle hand on my yoni or belly, but just like giving yourself the space, as much space as you need to try to feel into what will feel best in that moment, to just let whatever is happening pass or feel whatever is happening.
I want to jump in here, Tammy, and share that, like, moments like that can be so far deeper and intimate in intimacy and vulnerability and connection than
mm,
penetration. When you can
absolutely. Yeah.
really, like, feel the vulnerability, attune to what is needed, and provide a something different than the ingrained pattern. Like the
Hmm.
pattern is really important when it comes to breaking free of patterns and creating new ones. But just that alone, what you described of pausing, holding, being with what is, can be way more
Mhm.
intimate and really rewarding and nourishing.
Absolutely. It feels like those have been some of the most profound, like spiritual moments for me in partnership, coming from so much wounding to be able to have somebody attuned to me like so deeply to pause, and I may be crying, and to be held during an intimate moment, even if there is penetration, and for my heart to like feel like it's flowering open. It really feels like connection to the divine with a lover. And it is truly like a repatterning experience, not so different than what you might experience in like somatic therapy sessions, you know, working on your attachment wounds. And it feels like such a beautiful portal to be able to do that with someone for life, like as you are changing, like forever changing and getting to know this other being who will always evolve. And yeah, just I'm curious how your work contributes to helping the longevity of relationship when it seems like that's such a prevalent issue in our culture, is this kind of belief for me at a certain point, can I actually be with a lover for long term? Like I say that I want that, but it feels so sold to me that at a certain point, the fire dies, the love dies, the passion fades, beauty fades. And how does your work help that?
Well, I think it does in a couple of ways, but one way is that we really approach lovemaking sex as a practice. And this is particularly important long term because that initial like hot fire, it doesn't
Right.
remain that way forever, right?
Right.
So you do need to kind of schedule like your practice time. And, you know, I think part of these teachings is kind of dismantling the paradigm of what sex is, what it's for, and what it can look like. So really broadening the palette of all the different places of pleasure and joy that we can go into and discover with our bodies. So it's kind of like an endless place to play and discover in.
I mean, it's really fascinating to investigate how you define sex. And this is, when I say you, I mean each person. Because if sex is really a release, if sex is something to kind of pat myself on the back and say, I'm a good, healthy, capable sexual person, then it's going to be limiting. But as Ariel said, if it's a shared practice, if it's a meditation of discovery, I mean, it's really infinite how much you can discover and how much depth of awareness and attunement you can bring to yourself and to this organism that is the partnership. And the practice, I mean, we have a weekly practice and we continue to discover new things, both in erotic pleasure, in emotional depth, in, you know, our own kind of understanding of what existence is, because we find that the longer the states of erotic arousal we stay in, it starts to change our consciousness and the downloads that we get. And so it becomes this ever evolving inquiry and discovery of life and relationship.
Yeah, and the other thing I'm thinking about is how some people grow apart because they were meant to be together for a period of time and then they did what they needed to together and it's time to part ways. But some people also grow apart because they haven't really been fully honest with each other. So there's so much anger and resentment that builds up. And I think what the practice of this type of lovemaking, like extended lovemaking, the practice of the 8 pillars of intimacy, they require real depth of honesty so that over time, as naturally our desires, our preferences change over time, we can continue to see each other. And therefore, we can each continue to feel met by the other person. And things will kind of always be shifting and growing and changing, but we can do it together if we are willing to meet each other honestly.
Right. I think, would it be safe to say it's not like this type of work is just for the faint of heart? It's not a quick fix for a marriage or a long-term relationship, because it is spiritual practice. It's the same as like, I don't want to meditate this morning, but I've just, you know, this is what I do every morning and I don't always want to do it. Right. And would that be similar to this practice as a couple?
Well, I would say, like, relationships in general are not for the faint of heart. I
This
would
is
say,
true. Yes.
right? I mean, this is like,
Right.
I mean, you know, they say if you want a PhD in growth, get in a relationship, you know.
Totally.
But
Yeah.
I would also say, I mean, I think that's what the brilliance of the 8 pillars, and I feel like a lot of what we offer in the course is that it really meets people where they're ready to be met. So in the 8 pillars, for example, like the noticing, someone who may be dissociated might notice that they're not feeling very much. And that's the degree to which they're noticing. Someone else who's very embodied may notice the, flutters around their ankle or the energy going up their, the back of their neck, And so in the same way, noticing or, any of the pillars can be a simple awareness or a real in-depth inquiry. In that same way, I feel like so many of the practices are going to meet people where they're ready to be met.
Yeah. And it can be scary to be so honest. And what I find is that the level of honesty is what allows for whatever level of bliss, ecstatic pleasure you're going to experience in the relationship. So even though, of course, yes, this work is not for the faint of heart, going deep into any relationship is not. There are going to be days and weeks that are challenging and hard, and there's fighting. But then there's also going to be like, oh my God, these delicious, expansive, erotic states that kind of like keep you invested. It's like, okay, and it also sort of like resources the relationship. Like, you have this beautiful place you can go together, and it's not always accessible, but it's like a stabilizing force that can support you when things are hard.
Right. This is kind of when you were speaking before about the way that sexuality is distorted in our society. And I'm curious if you could open that up a little bit, what you noticed and what you mean by that. Because I feel like what you're describing right now is when the energies feel sort of balanced and both people are showing up to come to sacred sexuality to be a resource for love and a resource for their work in the world and thriving relationships. But what is the opposite? Where do we start from in society? What is the distorted sexuality that you're talking about?
Yeah. So the distorted sexuality is a reflection of the system that we live in, colonial capitalist patriarchy. It's an extractive system. So it organizes itself around extraction, and then therefore sexuality becomes performative, disconnected. It's about what someone is going to give instead of connection. And what it's extracting is the sacred. The system takes the sacred out of everything.
Yeah, that brings tears to the back of my eyes because I went through a really big dark night of the soul around 32 when I was with my partner of 6 years, and he was earnestly coming to me about guilt and shame around his porn preferences that he was working through in therapy, but it triggered all of my stuff. It felt like it triggered like ancestral memories, like all of woman's pain. And in my exploration, yes, it was like a time that I felt like all of my trauma responses were uncontrollable. Like it felt like woman's rage for generations. And I'm not proud of a lot of the ways that I showed up during that period of time, but it just felt like I did not have the capacity to hold all of that. And it came all at once. But when I was being self-responsible and doing the shadow work and self-inquiry, I was like, what is it in me that is also attracted to similar images in pornography? And what is it in me that is also attracted to this extractive quality and sex, and how I have kind of attracted that into my own life experiences? And then during that time, I went on a deep dive of porn, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to like existential kink the shit out of this. And I'm just going to dive in and see like what gets me off and what I'm turned on by. And then I stumbled and I hadn't even thought to search for this because I was in that reactive state of being like, porn is bad. All this stuff is like the reason that I've experienced rape or sexual, I was like, that was the story in my mind, which I think there's a lot of truth to the way it plays out in our society. But I stumbled across tantra porn, and I was like, wait, this could actually possibly heal the world. Like I just had this revelation because I found some creators who, had their own OnlyFans, but they were teaching like, how to, worship the male cock, or how to actually like one-way touch, the vulva. And this isn't something that I knew was available to me. Like I just thought that porn was what it was. the extractive thing that we've seen. So, and I think when I witnessed that, I was like, oh, this is the sacred. Like, sex is not bad, like attraction, desire, seduction is not inherently wrong. But when we divorce the sacred from it, that's when there's control and pain that's caused. So yeah, thank you for reminding me of that distinction.
Tammy, I want to share that, all the studies that are being done around human sexuality, the data being collected shows that the top indicator, the number one indicator of sexual pleasure is actually relational connection. Right?
Wow.
I feel like we're in a society, I know, like as a cis hetero guy growing up, like in the locker rooms, it's like, oh, did you hit a home run with your date? It's all about like achievement, results, not about emotional connection, which again is the number one indicator of sexual pleasure. Did you get some? There's an extractive quality, it's like, what do you get? Right. And then also growing up, there was this expectation, I think for young guy, I don't know how it is now, but like if you pay for a date, you expect something in return at the end. So there's all this it's almost like a commodification that is, as Ariel said, reflective of our colonialist capitalist, systems.
Right.
Totally.
That reminds me of, I even went through a period in my life in my 20s where I didn't want guys to pay for dinner because of the expectation I felt I pressured myself to then have sex with them.
Right.
I was like, no, we'll split it.
And then I was like coming into polarity and I was like, well, I do want to be taken care of. And so how do I lean back and let myself, be taken out without the expectation of sex afterwards as an exchange?
Yeah. And I think something else really beautiful that you just showcased was that it's not that porn is bad, right? There can actually be porn that's healing. It's just that a lot of the porn that's out there, a reflection of the sickness that is just a reflection of our mainstream culture of sexuality, right?
Right. Which is not so different from fast food or consumerism, just the way that we're addicted to shopping. And I know I've had this, I may cut this out of this podcast, but I've had this like fantasy of, God, I don't know, but one day, like, what if I could make beautiful porn that could show people how sacred intimacy could really look? And obviously I'm like just shielding my parents and family from this as a Chinese, good girl in their eyes. Like maybe I'll wait later, like when I'm in my 60s or something, when they've crossed over to the other side and they could give me blessings without their like, their shame on this earth. But that idea or that which is why I realized like sex education, like we didn't get that in school. We just got like wear condoms, and we were never really taught how to work with the energy of attraction. And that's been something that has been really painful and confusing and damaging in my life. Like just feeling the ways that, for example, the male gaze impacts my body, or even not learning what to do with attraction as a teenager, right? We have so many hormones and we're just taught that, okay, that means that we're going to make out and have sex, or even what to do with attraction when it comes to me from a man. Like there's this way that I've just subconsciously thought that if a man is attracted to me, I automatically owe them something, and it's taken so much somatic process to even understand on a body nervous system level that it's not just vanity, which kept me from talking about this for so long. Like I felt like, oh, I'm just vain. I just want all this male attention. But in one of my somatic therapy sessions, like breaking it down and realizing, how it was connected to my father's gaze. Like when he was looking at me, it felt like I was alive and glowing and dazzling. And then when he looked away in my somatic session, it was like, I couldn't believe I said this, but I was like, I'm like a deflated blow up doll. And suddenly it's like he took all of my organs from my body and I can't even breathe. And and all of my other extremities were panicking so much that it was like, well, I need to find another host. Like, where's another man out there that can give me my organs back? And I saw this pattern playing out in my romantic life as an adult, even though I said I wanted committed lifelong partnership, but I was the one still in this trauma response of like finding the next person to validate me slash give me my organs back, quote unquote, until I finally was able to learn how to give my like create my own organs and be an autonomous sovereign being. So yeah, I'm just curious your thoughts on attraction and how you've worked or teach about that in the sexuality world.
One, thank you for sharing like so openly about the effect of the male gaze, and particularly with the imprint from your father. Like we were talking about yesterday, something similar, I mean different but related, how when we're children and we get sexual attention, or we become violated as children sexually, it's often that like a child is often not mature enough to understand the ramifications of being touched in their private parts,
Mm-hmm.
but the attention is something that they know and crave and like.
Mm-hmm.
And a child can easily misunderstand that attention for love, or I am valued, or even I exist. And
Mm-hmm.
then that can become eroticized as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
that attention, whether it's good or bad or dangerous or safe or healthy or unhealthy, it means I exist, that I'm
Mm-hmm.
valid, that I'm.
Yeah, when you say I exist, that really resonates. Like just I exist, and then also how the body, I think, can experience violation of unwanted attention too. So it's like then that I exist and I'm seen gets coupled with, well, don't like look into my body like that, especially growing up as a young girl and starting to get stares when I was like 13 years old and feeling that invasive male gaze. And so then how I both want to be seen naturally as a expressive being growing into my womanhood, and also like it's just not safe to be seen, as eyes are like penetrating me without my yes. So it's
It's
like
like, yes,
these.
I want to be seen, but not like that.
Right.
Mm,
And then that gets confusing too, because I do want to be attractive to my partner. I do want to be attractive to my crush. But then, I went through a period of time of really closing myself off and dressing like really like covering myself up. And that also doesn't feel like my authentic expression. So there's all these layers of push and pull that I feel like your work is really addressing before we get anywhere near penetration.
Right.
mhm,
Right. And being attractive, like having someone be attracted to you is different than someone objectifying you. They're going to
Right.
land very differently in your body.
Can you speak more to that and what the difference feels like?
Yeah. So this brings us back to the sickness that permeates our culture around sexuality that is objectifying.
Mhm.
So we're all inundated with media that trains us to objectify our own bodies and other people's bodies.
Right.
And like, gosh, there is a difference. Like, if I think about it in my own body, if someone is objectifying me, I'm not actually being seen, because I'm not being seen as a human. I'm being dehumanized, and I'm being seen as something that they can like use or take something from me. Like, and then if someone's like just finding me attractive, I feel like I'm being seen in my being, in my
Mm.
essence, maybe my
Mhm.
soul, or my voice, or something about me that is true to me, not about something that they want to get from me or take from me.
And can you describe the somatic sensations of how those are different in your body just to give somebody an idea?
Well, for me, if I'm being objectified, my whole body tightens up. I'm like bracing and protecting, and I can feel my ligaments and my muscles kind of like, it's very subtle, but it's like a clenching in, like almost
Mhm.
like getting tight and crawling up into my insides. If
Mm.
someone is like really seeing me, and if I this is actually an interesting thing. If someone is really seeing me and I feel safe being seen, then like my cells expand out a little bit, like almost like there's breath moving in and out of each cell, and I can feel myself
Mm.
taking up a little bit of space, like really
Right.
inhabiting my body and the space around me.
Right. Beautiful.
The tricky thing is like, if I don't feel safe, right, if there's a link between being seen and lack of safety, like you were just talking about, there's going to be a period of
Right.
time of untangling those two things.
Totally. I feel like there was so much untangling for me between those two things because I had learned basically that getting objectification was safe for me, is like I was taught that my appearance and if somebody, I mistook objectification for attraction, like somebody being genuinely attracted to me. And so, and, just hearing about your history, Ariel, I'm curious if that was part of your journey too, of possibly at some point in your journey seeing the ways that you as a woman were taught to attract objectification.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with the confusion. Like, I would seek out the objectification, but it
Right.
never actually fed the desire for connection I had. It left me feeling worse and
Yeah.
more empty. I was tying my value to my desirability to men. And you know what, like really like a lightning bolt really shifted that for me was developing facial paralysis, which kind of like drastically quickly changed the way I look. So it really like it cracked through that identity I had of my desirability, my attractiveness is my value. It's the most important thing that I carry in this life.
Wow. Was this within your relationship or were you in a different relationship?
No, this was a long time ago. It's like into like 2016.
Yeah. Would you be willing to share? I imagine that that was a very dark night of the soul moment.
Yes, it was. I really believed I was ugly. Didn't want to go outside. I thought my real estate career was going to be over at that point. That's what I was doing. And, that role is so front facing and I'm seeing people all day, every day. But, there were also so many beautiful things that happened from that cracking open. I mean, one, like untangling that identity I had because I was, down in that pit of I'm desirable, I'm ugly, I want to hide. And so there was a part of me that wanted to get out of the pit. And that part of me was like, well, okay, let me find the things that make me who I am, that actually are valuable. And I was really over time able to anchor in other things that had nothing to do with.
And did it affect your relationship?
It did, in that I was convinced that my partner at the time was going to leave me because I thought I was ugly and I thought that's why he was with me.
Wow. Yeah, it's just thank you for sharing that. Like that's so vulnerable to share because I felt like that's so embarrassing to admit as a woman. Like this secret that's like, I don't know, in the back of my mind, always feeling like, oh, come on, at the end of the day, I know that you're really with me because I'm beautiful. And then this terror of like, what happens when that goes away,
Yeah.
Even though I know that's
wrong,
not true now.
So.
Yes, amazing.
I was proved wrong. That was also helpful, That would have been
Right.
pretty hard if he had left.
Well, I'm sure some beautiful learning journey, would have come from that as well and finding your value beyond that.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I'm so curious. Like we have Rahi, who's this like cis man. Like I'm just kind of curious, like on your side of things, like how you think about this stuff, or even how in your life, kind of growing up into manhood, how maybe it's shifted how you think about this stuff.
Well, I'm maybe not a good example because no, I mean growing up, I was like really into the quirky girls and just the offbeat, like the weirdos.
I mean, that's why he likes me. Right?
is what really it got me curious. Like the unusual. And so I'm probably not a good example. I mean, because like for me growing up, like I grew up outside of LA, so like the kind of the stereotypical blonde, blue-eyed, I don't want to disparage that stereotype, but it wasn't that interesting to me because it was so common. Like I went to school with so many, it's so many, it was predominantly Caucasian, just a lot of blonde and blue. And so it's kind of like my mom who confuses all my white friends and calls them the same name, like and so like, maybe you can relate to that, but like, and so I was always, but here's the other thing, Tammy, is like, I think human nature works this way. It's like when you really find someone attractive, when you like something about someone, you just see them as beautiful. And that's always been the case for me. Even when I remember in junior high school, there was this gal, Michelle, and she wasn't considered beautiful, but I thought she was the most beautiful girl in school because she was so cool.
Yeah, you know what I have really found in my experience is like, if I'm really in love with someone, just like you're saying, like everything about them is beautiful to me. And if something starts to feel beautiful about appearance for me, it's usually not about that, and it's actually about something else. But my psyche is kind of like finding a reason to like pull away or push away.
Right. It's a protective response. And that came up so much in that journey with my 6-year relationship, where we were having sex like maybe every 3 months, and I made it mean I'm not attractive, like, you're not attracted to me. And then the porn stuff like made it even worse. But that was like a huge growing journey for me, because at a certain point I couldn't just like be in my mess and just be in my victimhood. I had to realize all the ways that I was closing up myself sexually, closing up myself in finding my value beyond my appearance. And the relationship did end, but then beyond that, realizing it had nothing to do with the size of my body. It had nothing to do with any of that except my radiance, my inner being, my essence. And when we connected a few months later, that was like, he was so attracted to me, and it was, I was like, oh, I wish I had figured this out during the time that we were together, but yeah, I just think this is such an important conversation, because I do feel like that's like a very prevalent neuroses that I hear people talk about over and over again with aging and in long-term relationships, is the problem of attraction. And they think it's about appearances because that's what we've been sold. But it's really about this emotional depth and connection and safety that you're talking about.
I mean, like the hottest thing to me is attunement. If someone can attune to me, like that keeps my desire and attraction going. As soon as like attunement starts to disappear in the relationship, my desire disappears right with it.
I feel like some of the things that underscore in what you're sharing is that, just to your points, attunement, sense of safety, and emotional connection is what opens up your heart and your body. And these are the things that lead to deep sexual pleasure. I mean, looks may do it in the beginning, but going back to your question of like sustaining a relationship, it really comes down to, does this person see me and know me? Can they feel me? Are they with me?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a experience with my partner early on in our relationship where, of course, there was a little bit of the like conditioning around performance when we first became intimate. And there was a moment where I was like, wait, I need to ask for what I want. And it was like going too fast. And, you go into the autopilot thing, even if you've done this work for so long. And I was like, I need slowness. And then he actually like slowed down, and I suddenly felt myself with him again. And before that moment, I was like noticing I have no sensation in my pelvis right now. This is just like happening. Why are my thoughts elsewhere? Shouldn't I be like totally consumed in this beautiful act of lovemaking? And then when he slowed down, suddenly my heart opened. I had like tears, and I felt like in an incredible amount of pleasure in my pelvis. And it was like my yoni was like opening up to finally receive this love. And that did start with myself asking for what I needed, and even having the recognition to know what was going on.
There's a reason why slowing down is the first of the 8 pillars.
Genius. So simple, but seemingly so complicated for most, for most of us.
Oh my gosh, it can take so long to build that muscle to like speak. Oh
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the first muscle that gets constricted and closed off, from past trauma, is being able to speak. So yeah, I'm curious too, besides one-way touch, what are other practices then inside of the work?
Yeah, you had asked that about the pillars of the work. So we talked about the 8 pillars of intimacy, nervous system attunement, one-way touch. And the one-way touch involves mapping each other's full bodies as well as genital erogenous areas. There's non-penetrative lovemaking. And within those lessons and demo videos, there's a lot of expanding the body's capacity to be present to erotic states of arousal and pleasure. So this is again like deconditioning fast goal results, but can you explore what it's like just to be with heightened erotic states of arousal in the body, and be present with it and allow your kind of container to expand so that when you get to the pillar where we are in extended lovemaking, you can be present with that experience.
Yeah, and in the non-penetrative lovemaking, there's like different ideas on ways to like have your genitals touch without penetration.
Right.
And then if you move into penetration, approaching it as a meditation.
And that really, I imagine, helps, like when you say expanding capacity, because I feel like many of us dissociate during that without even knowing, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to dissociate and it's going to be finished and then that's it. And so slowing down and staying with each moment to moment, you're like actually bringing the body safety to each increase of holding these erotic states, right?
Right. In any moment that it's not pleasurable for both people, that's a great time to slow down and pause. See what needs.
Right.
Pattern interrupt.
Absolutely. Because during that moment, usually like we don't speak because we're like, well, we don't want to ruin the moment. I don't want to ruin this for the other person. And it's all these assumptions that we're going to be the bad and wrong ones. But the reality is both people probably feel it and both are afraid to speak, right?
Yeah. And once again, pausing at that moment can open the doors up to real intimacy, because then you can really be vulnerable and share what's going on with each person.
So beautiful.
And I find that a lot of partners, like, we can have this fear of, I don't want to ruin this for my partner. My partner's in pleasure right now. But most of the time I hear from the other person, but I want you to feel good right now. If it doesn't feel good to you, then I don't want to do it.
Yeah, like the surprising thing is always that my partners surprisingly get a lot of pleasure out of me having pleasure, and there's just so much unlearning that happens through relating.
Yeah, and that's why relating is, the ultimate kind of altar for I think, the evolution of your consciousness and self-awareness. And again, the pillars are really, really brilliant because they can be applied in any kind of intimate situation.
Are you willing to share maybe a difficult moment in your relationship that you were moving through that this work helps you through?
Yeah.
Which one do you want to share?
Oh, let's look amongst our favorite ruptures to see which one wants to be shared. Right? I mean, something that I feel like, well, okay, let me choose one. I don't know, for some reason the summer rupture comes up. Like when I went to my high school reunion and came back. Do you have a favorite one?
You can go where you want to go. I don't know where you're going to go with that one, but
I'm like searching for it for the what happened with the rupture. So if you have one ready.
Well, I'm thinking about how just the other week we were actually in our love lab. Every Friday we dedicate, it's like our day of devotion, and it's our play space. Also a space where we like discover new things. We stay in bed a lot of the day, but we also like to go to the beach and enjoy food together. But in the middle of the day at lunch, we got into a fight. And it was like, we were just kind of at each other. And it was like a old fight. It's a fight that we would have all the time previously. And it went away for a while, but here it was back again, this familiar energy pattern. And, we kind of, we both got to a point of being able to be like, okay, let's drop it. And then both being able to actually drop it. And then kind of like some sadness came in and, distance and kind of like, but like sometimes when there's a rupture, you actually aren't open to connecting it. There needs to be some space, but this wasn't a big enough one where that happened for either of us. And we ended up being able to like actually let it go and make love. And then the whole thing just kind of went away. It's not like it's not something that we'll need to look at and figure out. But it didn't turn into this like day-long thing that we need to excavate. Just our love making, the energy of the eros and the pleasure that we were experiencing together was just kind of like dissipated the pieces of it that were kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, if I can chime in there, like sometimes when, in my experience, sometimes when I'm in a rupture, there's an egoic part of me that really wants to be right. And there's a part of my, there's a part of my inner attorney that's collecting evidence. It's going through all the file cabinets of, past, reasons that why I'm right and so forth. But, when we made love, the connection from our lovemaking so far superseded all that ridiculous the evidence gathering, that I just kind of like mentally threw all those files into the ocean and just like made constant love. And you realize, oh wait, this is what our relationship is about. It's not about being right and making my points. So that's what it was like for me. And the experience, I was chewing on like the example that came up in the summer, and what it was, you had looked into the trafficker, your sex trafficker's eyes, and found love.
Yeah.
And then so this was a situation where Ariel has done so much work over her past history of and one of those is being trafficked. Now I haven't gone through, like, I still have more processing to do around that to forgive this person who I've never met, but I know caused harm. But Ariel's, kind of lived through it. And so when she expressed compassion for him, it triggered something in me where I got really scared. I was like, oh, if Ariel can forgive someone like him, who in my mind is a monster, who I still have not forgiven, then what other dangerous situations might she be in? And I didn't realize that it was that scared part of me that got triggered. It was more like, I want to be, and I ended up choosing something else to argue about, that it wasn't even about that. It was about, and so a lot of times when I find, for me, when I'm in a rupture, I'm arguing to be right about something that's not even the main point. Boy got scared in regards to that earlier, and I'm just trying to protect myself,
right,
and wanting to be right about it.
And these are where the pillars are so important, because when things are fiery and there's so much going on, we have to slow down. We had to slow down. You had to, and take a pause. Like, what's actually going on for you? What are you actually feeling? Right? You got to go inside.
And what was actually beneath what other situations could she get into? Like, what was, beneath the anger and the hurt?
Well, so what Ariel has pointed out, in a number of ruptures that have happened, in our relationship, it's usually that little boy in me that gets scared that Ariel's going to be in some kind of danger, and so there's a part of me that wants to protect. I mean, it's really protecting her and us. And when that little one gets activated, he usually finds something to argue about that's somehow correlated to that.
Yeah, and then it's interesting because then I end up usually have a reactive part that feels like he's trying to control me.
Right. Yes.
So I'm like teenager, like, no, like,
right.
But what I find in these kind of these moments is that whoever has the most capacity at the moment needs to hold it down and then wait their turn till later. Like, that's not always possible. Like, sometimes I'm like, I just got to go at it. Right when you're going at it, I'm going at it too. But like, if I can, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to hold it down right now. Like, I'm actually good. And like, I'll get my turn maybe tomorrow or something to like express my side of things.
Yeah. I love that.
And then there are times when I'm like, okay, she thinks she's holding it down until tomorrow. I'll let her think she's holding it down because I can hold it together for us until next week.
Wait, what do you mean?
No, I was just making a joke. She always thinks she's the one holding it down, and she often is.
Same.
So
Oh,
I
it's
was
so
making a
wonderful
joke.
to know that.
Yeah, but
Not always though. Sometimes you are too. I'll give you that.
Oh,
Sometimes.
Thank you. But Tammy, something I want to share is that, as Ariel mentioned, every Friday we have a day of devotion, and we spend most of it in bed. And that, I mean, it's not only about lovemaking; it's really things that accumulate during the week. We get to kind of process, or there's a space for everything to kind of metabolize.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if there have been disagreements or whatever, like in between our lovemaking, they usually get resolved.
Yeah. Well, when you were first sharing about Love Lab, you said there was a rupture that happened, and normally you would go into it, but instead you chose lovemaking. Was there something like, was there a segue? Was there some kind of relational practice first to attend to the rupture before going into lovemaking? Or was it just a moment of choosing lovemaking?
I kind of feel like you initiated it.
I think I did. I think I was feeling like really sad, and we were just kind of like holding each other. And then I think I asked if you would make love to me or something. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I'm
Yeah.
curious.
Oh, I think I asked him if he would make love to my sad part.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And this is where pleasure can be potent medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because when there are aspects of ourselves that are sad or scared or feel ugly, or feel judged, like making love and bringing pleasure to those aspects can really metabolize a lot.
Definitely. For myself and my partner, we're both really into like ritual theater and acting and stuff. So there's a big part that's like almost shadow work through different characters, that are our wounded parts, but they become like full characters, that like these energies get to like be in erotic play together. And I'm curious if that's any part of your practice or your work.
No, that sounds amazing.
But remember when we as far as character work, when you were 13, remember we replayed?
We have in our personal like practice, but it's not.
Yeah.
That's not a piece of our practice.
Yeah. But
can you tell me about your personal practice?
Oh. Yeah, but
this was oh my god, this was so special. So I wanted to like replay a different ending, and Rahi played a man who raped me when I was 13, and we like, I told him the scenario I wanted to be in, and then I got to leave the car, so I got to say no. And then or maybe we did the beach
at the beach. Yeah. But you got to really use your voice, stand in your power, and create like a different somatic ending. Like we had a beach towel. We created the whole scenario, but Ariel got to could experience somatically a different ending to that story.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Like in my own path, that's when I was really starting to explore what is in BDSM or kink that can actually be very somatically healing for sexual trauma. And yeah, thank you. That's very validating to hear your personal exploration. And I feel like when I first heard about role play, or when me and my partner of 6 years at the time were like, what about role play? There wasn't that safety that we've talked about, and that connection and attunement that we've talked so much about in this conversation, for that to even feel natural, And so it just, for you to even have the safety to build that scene and also keep a straight face and like be in it together, like really present, I think takes this beautiful body of work that you've created together to really be present with one another and be in service to each other's process.
Yeah, I think this speaks to the importance of really creating clear and sacred containers. I feel like our love labs are really sacred containers, and because there has to be that safety, there has to be talk about boundaries and aftercare. There needs to be so you can really drop into whatever the container is inviting you to drop into.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. Well, I'm curious, what's coming up in terms of your teachings of Divine Union for Lovers? I know you have 2 retreats coming up, and where can people find your work?
Yeah, so people can find us at divineunionforlovers.com. We have an evergreen self-paced course that people can take on its own or with personalized support. And then we have these couples retreats coming up, one in June, one in September. They're 3 days for 3 couples. Do you want to say a little bit about them?
Yeah, sure. We keep it small, so it's very intimate. And it's a lot of the material from our online course, but it's in person. So, like, it's live demos. So, I will demo a one way touch practice on Ariel. People get to understand, ask questions. And then when they go off into their private rooms to practice with each other, we're like, positioned in the middle of the doorways. So, if there's some if they need some pointing out as to an erogenous zone of the vulva or the penis or the, whatever it is, we're right there and they can kind of course correct or adjust in real time. And then we get together, the 3 couples and the 2 of us and people, I love group experiences because everyone's learning from each other while their own bodies are new patterns.
Yeah. And then on the third day, there's the optional bringing in of some plant medicine.
Well, that sounds like such a beautiful experience, and I hope that me and my partner will be able to be there with you in person, definitely at some point. And I'm just so grateful for you sharing your work in the world and for sharing your personal relationship and experience today. I feel like this is such a necessary conversation in the sex world. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for having us, Tammy. This was so great. Thank you.
Come with him one day, taste the roots. He was born from passing the story, how all hands came together as one.